When we're free to love anyone we choose, when this world's big enough for all different views, when we all can worship from our own kind of pew, then we shall be free. Unitarian Universalism is rooted in a long and historic commitment to the practice of religious freedom. We can trace our Unitarian roots back to the radical reformers in 16th century Europe who wanted to go beyond the Protestant reforms of Martin Luther and John Calvin. These radical reformers, our Unitarian forebears, questioned the doctrine of the Trinity and advocated for religious tolerance and freedom of conscience in matters of religion. For such views, they were persecuted as heretics and sometimes killed. The ancient Greek root of the word heresy literally means to choose. If it is heresy to choose, well, heretics we are. I assume, I certainly am. Unitarian Universalists value choice, and we have long defended religious freedom and the separation of church and state. Our tradition of the free pulpit goes back to the Edict of Torda in 1658, which is widely considered the first legal guarantee of religious freedom in Europe. The Transylvanian king who issued that edict was Unitarian. And in this country, it was our Universalist forebears in the 18th century who worked alongside Quakers, Baptists, and others to end the practice of state-supported churches in New England. The long-standing commitment to freedom of conscience shows up in the democratic ways we govern ourselves as Unitarian Universalists. It shows up in our covenants, and it shows up in the diverse ways we express ourselves spiritually and theologically too. The history of our religious movement is characterized by an increasing theological openness, born of the twin beliefs that there is a divine spark in all people, and that God's love embraces all of humanity regardless of religious persuasion. From these early theological heresies, an increasing pluralism has blossomed. We celebrate, if we could have the slide of our value, please, of pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. In planning this service today, Eric and I didn't just want to talk about pluralism as a value, we also wanted to showcase it because it's right here in this room. Thanks to Scott, Loretta, and Eric, we know there are Christian UUs, pagan UUs, and UUs who don't have a ready-made word to describe their spiritual orientations among us. Reverend Amy was raised as a conservative in a conservative Jewish household and defines herself as an atheist UU, or a religious humanist. I'm a spiritual agnostic with Buddhist leanings who is inspired by liberation theologies, but that's a terrible mouthful to say, so I'm just happy calling myself a UU. Between the five of us, we've covered Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, paganism, atheism, humanism, agnosticism, and poetics. So, we're wondering what other spiritual orientations are here among us. If you haven't heard, kind of your spiritual orientation mentioned so far, could you just raise your hand and I'll repeat back what you say? Yes. Pantheism. Okay. Communitarianism. And musicalist. Musicalist. We're going to learn some new words today. Anybody else? Yeah, sorry, I don't have my glasses on.
I represent a Christian who believes that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through him. And I'm here, and I hope I'm accepted.
Thank you. You are welcome here. We have no creeds. Anybody else? Yes. Skip my boss. Equality. Everybody, every person, everything. A naturalist. Yeah. A feminist. A lot of these things can overlap, of course. We can be multiple identities. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Atheistic paganism, atheopaganism. See how many words we're learning? Yes. Confucianism. Excellent. Buddhism. Taoism. There's a second for that. Indigenous. Well, great. I'm sure we would go on, but this gives us a sense of the rich diversity among us. You heretics! How great that we have found each other and that we are committed to building a community where all of us are welcome to say exactly what we have said and to be responded to with curiosity and with respect, and that we have covenants and shared values that hold us together. Because not everything goes in Unitarian Universalism. If there are things that are against our values, that doesn't work here. It's against our covenants. But as long as the expressions of the sacred, of humans and the world express our values, they are most welcome here. Pluralism, explains religion scholar Diana Eck, is not the same thing as diversity. Diversity is a fact. We live in a world and in a country with spectacular diversity. Pluralism describes a particular way of relating to diversity. Instead of trying to minimize diversity through exclusion or assimilation, for example, pluralism creates intentional space for engagement with diversity inside a common container. Pluralism isn't about tolerance either. It's about engagement, genuine engagement with diversity, bringing our differences to the table or to the pulpit, exploring them with each other, not seeking to ignore or minimize them in the hopes of avoiding discomfort or conflict. Pluralism isn't a fact, it's an achievement. It's something we have to work toward. In theory, the United States is a pluralistic democracy, but it's a work in progress. Sadly, it's clear that some people really don't want to live in a pluralistic democracy and are actively trying to undermine it. So it's all the more important that we have places to practice it like this one at UUCSR. Practicing pluralism means that none of us gets to be in the center all the time. In this community, it means we don't get to hear our preferred form of expression in worship. We sometimes do, but not always. Atheists have to hear the word God. Theists have to put up with the awkward way we often replace the word God in our hymns and other things. Rationalists have to put up with ritual. Pagans have to put up with rationalists. Everyone has to hear stories that aren't their own, and we all have to translate. No one gets to be comfortable all the time, and everyone gets to be uncomfortable some of the time. Isn't that great? Recently, I preached a sermon that seems to have stirred the pot. Although there were lots of potentially controversial things in that sermon, which was about the shared value of equity and some little bits about authoritarianism sprinkled in, what drew the most fire, both positive and negative, was a short section about how equity shows up in the teachings of Jesus and the Christian Gospels. It was as if no one had ever preached about Christianity here before, but I know that they have. Christianity is the source tradition of Unitarian Universalism, and it remains a rich thread in our increasingly pluralistic tradition. Some of us really struggle with Christianity, and for good reason. It's the dominant religion in our country. It has been used to justify bigotry and oppression throughout history, and today it's justifying fascism in the form of white Christian nationalism. But as Scott so beautifully illustrated, there are many different kinds of Christianity, Christianities, we might better say. Some of them are powerfully liberating. When we draw from Christianities in UU contexts, what matters is that it expresses our shared values of justice, equity, pluralism, interdependence, generosity, and love. When it expresses our shared values, it is welcome here, just like Buddhism, or Mary Oliver, or science, or any other source of inspiration that aligns with our values. We celebrate diverse expressions of our shared values. So some of us are thrilled to hear our UU values in Christian forms. Others squirm in their seats. But my friends, it's okay. If we're doing this whole pluralism thing right, it's going to be that way. We're all going to take turns being overjoyed and squirming in our seats. Even in the course of one worship service, if we're doing it right, there will always be parts of the service that resonate for you and parts that don't. So when we sing that hymn that you detest, take a deep breath and look around. Remember that someone else in here loves that hymn. Same goes for all the other elements of the service, right? And our services as a whole. Pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. I think that's a beautiful expression of why we accept the challenges of pluralism in Unitarian Universalism, why we put up with the periods of discomfort and even disorientation it can sometimes cause, because we celebrate that each one of us is sacred and therefore has spiritual insights to share, that each one of us and each source of wisdom or knowledge we draw on has a piece of the truth. And so when we put those pieces together, we have a fuller view, a richer experience of what it means to be human in this dazzlingly diverse, infinitely interesting, and ever unfolding universe.